If you are interested in setting up or engaging with young people in rural areas, then one size doesn't fit all. I think you've got to look at your context, you've got to look at the partners that are out there to work with and decide, you know, for you, what's the best outlet, what's the best model of working. In Cheshire, we sort of grappled with this whole idea of how do you get hold of those slippery fish, those young people, those 14 to 19-year-olds out in those rural areas. And we sort of felt our way through a project. We run a scheme, a touring scheme. We also had an early years project that was running parallel to the scheme. But we did all sorts of scattergun projects with young people, mainly very reactive as opposed to proactive. And what we ended up doing was that we ended up making a bespoke piece of theatre for 14 to 19-year-olds in rural Cheshire, made directly from their stories, but cast and produced professionally and toured back into those rural youth clubs from whence it came. And I have those fantastic inspirational words ringing in my ears from John from his keynote speech, which was about engagement, participation and empowerment. And I think probably we tried, without realising that was our template, we tried to embrace those things in this project. Let's go back a bit. Right. As I say, we tried to do lots of things. My background in young people's theatre and youth theatre really made me want to do something other than maybe just buy in product that I wasn't necessarily convinced I'd get an audience for, because I felt that without that partnership, we have one officer in Cheshire. I wasn't sure whether we could do the development work necessary in order to get audiences to anything that we were going to put on. So we also, and this is the worthy bit, from that youth theatre and education background, I really wanted to switch young people onto not just being the receivers, but really getting engaged in what I suppose I would call the transformational nature of theatre. As well as practically opening doors by working in partnership with our youth service, who would in turn then engage in those broader themes of whatever theatre we were going to make, so that it wouldn't just be go in, see the show, everybody had a nice time and off we go. If we engage with those partners, whatever theatre we made and whatever theatre we put in front of those young people, they would then have an opportunity to perhaps glean some youth work capital out of that process as well. One of the main themes on my list, and I'm not reading it down for you, but one of the key things that motivated this project was that when we looked at our audience survey figures, only 4% of our audiences were 12 to 19-year-olds, so that was quite shocking to us. So how did we start? Well, we started by building a model that could theoretically be repeated. Something that was more strategic, something, as I say, that would have more impact, lasting impact. The first thing we did was we found a youth work champion. Very difficult because the youth work, I'm sure it's the same everywhere else. There's loads of restructuring happening. Youth workers are often fighting just to keep their jobs, keep their youth clubs open. And so we took a long time knocking on a lot of doors to try and convince people that we could deliver on the youth work agenda. But we found a champion who gave us resources, as in youth work time. Then we found a brilliant artist, a director, a writer, who really knew about young people's stuff and was trusted by the youth service. Then we found a core group of young people to work with. We did some devising with music and drama over a period of time. And then we cast the show with professional performers and toured it back into rural youth clubs But we also tied in the young people as being partly producers in that process, in that they helped audition the actors, they came to rehearsals, and they were sort of young promoters when we actually toured the show back in. So what have we done so far? Whoops. We've produced a play called The Mazefield that we had 25 shows, 1,600 young people saw it. This piece was predominantly about the high incidence of fatalities amongst young people in car accidents in rural Cheshire, particularly on the A41, if anybody knows that area. The second piece, after we repeated this process, was called Cross Your Heart. And by that time, we really wanted to share this model of working, so we engaged with a filmmaker who stuck with the process for the whole year, and we created a sort of a case study online resource, which was a DVD and a booklet. That, because we had less funding for, went to about 1,000 young people, did about 14 shows. And now we're on its third incarnation, and this piece is called 12 Miles from Nowhere, and this is a slightly different model, in that we're working with Action Transport Theatre, our homegrown Cheshire young people's theatre company, who are well known for their new writing. And we've engaged with 4 actor-writers who have done the development work. They've written the show, and then they will tour, they will act in it and tour back when we actually eventually do the tour in the autumn of this year. And this piece has sort of almost transcended making a piece for young people, because this piece is actually out there for an adult audience as well. It's the way it's developed, it's just a really brilliant rural touring show that has a relevance to young people, but particularly is just a cracking good rural touring show. So I'm just going to play us out, and maybe towards the end of the session, with the beginnings of the DVD, which is basically tells you a little bit from the young person's point of view, a little bit about the process that we went through in order to get the scripts for these 3 shows. All right? And then maybe if people want to ask some questions, I can at the end. Is everything clear so far? Sure. Good.